So, I know I'm a few days late to the party, and everything that's been said has probably been beaten to death. But on Thursday morning of July, I was at San Diego Comic-Con when we got the news that Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, died at 71 years old. And sorry for the beeping, by the way. I was standing in line waiting for the doors to open at Comic-Con, and saw the news. Wife showed me, and much like a lot of things on the internet, I didn't want to believe it at first, or didn't trust it at first, until we sat down at the WWE Mattel Creations panel at Comic-Con, and Sam Roberts came out and officially said the word that we, in fact, the wrestling community, wrestling fans, did in fact lose Hulk Hogan. As somebody who was born, I was born in '83, so I may not necessarily remember, but I was around for the beginning of WrestleMania, towards the beginning of Hulkamania's rise, through the 80s, into the 90s, where Hulkamania was running wild, brother. And then the creation of the NWO, him being the third man, his return to WWE, and him winning the Undisputed title. And then all the craziness that came out about the man of Terry Bollea. Not the character of Hulk Hogan, but the man of Terry Bollea. And it took me a few days to make a video about it, because one, again, like got down to San Diego on Wednesday, Comic-Con all day Thursday, all day Friday, and came back up yesterday, which was Saturday the 26th. So Comic-Con is still wrapping up. Today's the last day. It took me a little bit to think about what I wanted to say, had to say. Probably a lot of what I'm going to say has already been repeated to death, like I said. But for my generation growing up with Hulk Hogan, it is a sad day. Right? For wrestling, Hulk Hogan is one of the most important people, characters, personas of all time. There is no denying his importance to professional wrestling. Vince McMahon needed Hulk Hogan. Wrestling in the 80s needed Hulk Hogan. He was the right persona, right person at the right time for everybody to click. I said before in other videos that WrestleMania could have worked if Vince, with Piper, right? It wouldn't have been as big as what it was because of Hulk, without Hulk Hogan. But with that said, Hulk needed Piper, right? Piper and Hogan were the keys to making WrestleMania work. But Hulk was larger than life in that era. The 80s needed two people: Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. Two people. The positive is he was larger than life. He helped push wrestling mainstream, pop culture. It wasn't just an underground thing anymore. It wasn't just, something old drunk guys watch. It wasn't just some hillbilly show anymore. By the end of the 80s, early 90s, it hit mainstream. And a big part of that was Hulk Hogan. And it took, love him or hate him, he was smart. Hulkamania wouldn't have been anything without Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon would not be what he became, good or bad, without Hulk Hogan. We would not be sitting here today talking about wrestling like we are without the contributions of what Hulk sure did. In-ring stuff, he was charismatic, he was larger than life, he was a superhero, right? We laughed back then, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, how everybody was a character. There were so many, just whether there's a character like Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, or Doink the Clown, or someone who was a plumber, who was a lumberjack, who was a Mountie, who was an IRS agent, right? But he was the character among characters, the superhero amongst everybody else. He really became the immortal one. So he had the charisma, he had the personality, I had the pleasure of meeting him twice. Once at a Comic-Con maybe 10 years ago, I want to say. And he was just, even then, he was larger than life. You know what I mean? Athleticism. There's videos and tapes out there you can search on YouTube of he could work. He could do the things when he was in Japan. Like, they expected that of him, and he delivered. But he was not expected to do that here. There's the ongoing joke of his creative control and that not working for me, brother. But he also knew when something would have hit. He knew the NWO was going to work. That's why he probably said yes to it. He knew the paycheck for him would have been great, and he may have did it and said yes for himself. But that's because he knew it would work, right? He may not have put as many people over as he should have, probably. Comparatively speaking, I would always say, and it's a hill I'm willing to die on, that Ric Flair put more people over during his career, and we are better for it than Hulk Hogan ever did. Hulk Hogan, you could say, he helped put over Goldberg, he helped put over the Ultimate Warrior, but he would always try to put himself over first, right? And in a way, I can't blame the guy for wanting to make sure and wanting to secure himself, but Ric Flair shows that you could put more people over and make them look good and still be the guy. You know what I mean? So that's definitely one of his faults as the man needing too much into Hulk Hogan, into Hulkamania, that he wasn't more willing to put people over. You know what I mean? More people than he should have. He really should have. But I tell you, like, I look back at that time as somebody who's going to be 42 soon. Hulkamania is, like, at this point in my life, a key part of what made me love wrestling. You know, Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania was always wrestling, and that will never go away. I still catch myself walking around singing his Real American theme song, you know, just out of nowhere. I just start singing it. The NWO theme music is always in my head, just like that. Can't tell you how many key wrestling memories I have is because of Hulk Hogan. So those are memories, things I will always cherish, I'll always remember. And those things that can, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, and that's something that you cannot diminish for people. Now, especially in recent years, to separate the character from the man, I also can't blame people for not forgiving Terry Bollea, the man. Whether it's the racist shit he says or said, his non-willingness to put people over, you know, the joke that I said before of him, like, that doesn't work for me, brother. Him saying brother with the hard R, if you know what I mean. You know, 40 years ago, before the internet, or the internet was a thing, even 30 years ago, he could say some of the crazy, outlandish shit that he said, like auditioning to be a guitar player for Metallica. I mean, it's not like in 1989. It's not, you can't just Google it. You know what I mean? You can't just DM Metallica and say, "Hey, Lars, did he do this?" Nowadays, you know, things are easily disproven or easily Googled. You know, and you know, with other podcasts, with other wrestlers' podcasts, touching on, did Hulk really do that? And they're like, no, I was there. He didn't do shit. You know, people will always look at him like, dude, you're a liar. You're a selfish, lying racist. And I cannot blame people for feeling that way. I really can't. It's not my place to tell them, like, oh, you need to get over it. You know what I mean? And that will always, I will always say that's a dark stain on him. You know, like, some of his personal life stuff, you know, his divorce, his, you know, son's car accident or his wreck, you know, that it's, you know, it's like, it's a tough spot for anybody. You know what I mean? You feel for the guy, but you know, you can't just be dropping N-bombs and then half-assed apologizing for it. Yes, he became born again, but you know that, you know, I'm with the sentiment that you could be a born again Christian, you could apologize, but you have to actively change. You know, like, you can't just apologize and say, okay, I apologize, and go back to doing the same thing. Like, people are gonna be like, the fuck? You know, there's only so many times you could apologize for doing the same shit before people say, you know what, enough. But at the end of the day, Hulk Hogan, the performer, Hulk Hogan, the character, Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, Hulk Hogan, the movie star, Hulk Hogan, the champion, he will always be there. Hulkamania will always be running wild, right? You cannot bring up any important wrestling moment from 1980 till 2020 or 2010 or whenever he officially went away without having Hulk Hogan be a part of it. Some of the biggest events and memories and moments in wrestling had Hulk Hogan. Him slamming Andre, him defeating Iron Sheik, the first WrestleMania, Hogan Flair, Hogan, any of the Hogan Macho Man matches, WrestleMania 18, him versus The Rock. These are all moments that will live forever, and that's what will makes him the immortal Hulk Hogan. You know, how many people, if they want to think logically or critically, will say that some of the best matches in the world were with Hulk Hogan, or some of the greatest moments are with Hulk Hogan. You know, to separate the art from the artist, you know what I mean? It's okay to not want to celebrate the guy, knowing some of the shit he said or did, lied about. But as an 80s and 90s kid, 80s baby, 90s kid, I will always love Hulk Hogan. He will always be a core memory for me. One of my first memories was Hulk Hogan versus Paul Orndorff. You know what I mean? Like, sitting in my great aunt's living room. Oh, she loved friggin' wrestling, and she loved Hulk Hogan, and she hated Paul Orndorff. And she was babysitting me. You know, Aunt Margaret, Grandma Margaret, may she rest in peace. I remember sitting there playing with this friggin' car. I think it was a Mask vehicle. For any of my 80s kids that remember Mask. And she's sitting there cursing at the television. 70, 80 some years old. Cursing at the television. Because Paul Orndorff is beating up Hulk Hogan. You know? And that will always be a fond memory of mine. You know? So, for wrestling, and this is just my opinion, I respect you if you disagree, wrestling lost one of its icons. Possibly the icon, right? A name that if you ask anybody, name a pro wrestler, they're going to tell you like one of two people. Hulk Hogan or The Rock. Right? They know that they might not know everybody else. They're not going to know Nick Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler. They might not know CM Punk or LA Knight. Right? But they're going to know Hulk Hogan. He transcended wrestling. He's transcended pop culture. And we would not be here. We would not be where we're at as wrestling fans if it wasn't for him. And for that, we should be thankful. Beyond that, whatever you feel is fair. I gotta respect that. But remember, Hulkamania was so important to wrestling, and that should be remembered. That should be celebrated. And the red and yellow will live forever, brother. You know, Hulkamania will always run wild, and it'll always be a part of us. It'll always be part of wrestling. Every time we watch WrestleMania or talk about WrestleMania, whenever you want to think of your greatest memories, greatest matches, biggest moments, whether it was from WrestleMania 1 or the formation of NWO and the Bash at the Beach, and being the third man. So I'll leave it at that before I ramble on too much. Become that old guy rambling, yelling, "Get off my lawn." But Hulkamania will live forever. And you guys have a wonderful day. Happy Sunday. And have fun, guys. Peace.